thought it might be a good idea to make a small film just around my house, showing some of the things I've made over the years. I tend to make all sorts of models and gadgets and electronics and various things, so I thought we'd have a look. My house is very small, so it's just a little 2-bedroom house. We can have a look. If we look in here, this thing, which is currently on its side, is a motorised bus blind sign. So this is actually off a London bus. And of course most people get these things and they just chop out a couple of destinations and frame them, put them up on the wall. Of course I never do anything the simple way, so I made this sign where you can rotate the blind to show the different destinations. This is all horribly overcomplicated, of course, but basically down inside there's a little mechanism which controls the blind so that it'll go to the ends and then stop automatically. So you can't actually run past the end of the blind. Eventually this is going to be covered in an aluminium housing with curved corners to look a lot like a British Routemaster bus. And that's the look I want to go for, the bright red. What else do we have in here? This was the Enigma watch, of course. If we go into there's the TARDIS. We'll have a look at that in a second. This is my spare room, so this is where a lot of my stuff is. You can see the triplane there and shelves. There's Steed, of course. This is Bender. I did do there's a whole website on beer brewing Bender. The beer brewing part is in the middle here. Now he talks, so there's a remote control based on one that was in one of the episodes, and we can...
Oh my god, I just built it for men. Let's go get drunk. You can brew your own. You're like my shiny metal ass.
And he just talks. So to do that, I made a 6502 based computer, because in the program Futurama, that's supposedly what's powering Bender's brain. So I created my own version using a 6502 computer. That all lives up in the head, of course, and it just plays those samples. If we keep looking around, I'll just turn Bender off. This is the Turing Welchman bomb, of course. These are my computer and where I do a lot of my fiddling around. This is actually a weather satellite picture. One of my hobbies, I guess, was receiving weather satellite pictures, so I've got an antenna on the roof we can have a look at, and I just have that sitting there continuously getting these pictures from the satellites as they pass over. My first version used a purpose-built receiver, and I had some electronics on that would scan the different satellite frequencies looking for the carrier signal, and then it would lock onto them to record the images that came down. These days you just do it all with what's called software-defined radio. So if we look, there's a little dongle under there connected to the PC, and it's all just done in software these days. So that's the receiver sitting there running. Now there's various bits and pieces scattered around. One of the things I was working on, if we can find the right screen, there was the 80s series of Sherlock Holmes with Jeremy Brett. In one of the episodes, at the end of it, there's this little monkey automaton that smokes and moves. It might be a little bit hard to hear. But I was always fascinated by this thing, and wanted to build my own version. So let me stop that. Of course the sound in that is all faked. It isn't really playing that tune. That would have all been dubbed in. But I started making it. So for example, here's a little carved wooden head and some little hands for him. And then I got distracted doing the sound, because I wanted it to also play, because it's a music box. So I started playing with these little music box things that use punched paper. So what I actually did was, instead of using the theme song from the 80s version of Sherlock Holmes, I'm using the version from the modern Benedict Cumberbatch version of Sherlock. Now, I'm not musical, so it was quite a job for me to figure out how to do all this and transcribe things, but I just sort of worked it out. This thing's been sitting on my windowsill for so long, I think the paper's shrunk and it doesn't really play very well anymore, but you get the idea. It's actually slipping a bit, the paper. Now, I couldn't really build my little monkey thing with this in it. One, it just wouldn't last. I mean, that's going to wear out pretty quickly. So what I ended up doing was making a little electronic version. I actually found an app that you can run on your phone. It's probably one of the very few apps I've actually got installed on my phone that simulates one of those music boxes. So I used that, and I transcribed the pattern from this into that app, and then used that to record a sound file. And then I made some electronics here. This is just a little tiny, effectively an MP3 player, and that's got the sample on it. So and that just plays the music. So the idea would be eventually I'll build this little monkey, smoking monkey figure, and this will go in the base of it to play the music. As I say, I'm not musical, so I don't know how accurate this music is, but it sounds okay, I think. What else do we have? This is just another little gadget I was fiddling with. It's basically to simulate firelight. So if we turn the brightness up here, it flickers. That's all it does. Just a little circuit that lets you control how much flickering there is. And it had a timer on it. And what I was trying to do was simulate flickering firelight with the bulb. It's just another little project I was halfway through and never really completed. I'll come back to these things. I sort of move around a bit and do different things. We'll stop this here, and we'll have a look at something else in a second. I have to stop filming every so often because my camera will only let me make films 10 minutes long for some reason. This is another one of my projects. This came about after I built Bender's Brain. So Bender's Brain is a 6502 computer, as I mentioned. This is also a 6502 computer I've built from scratch. That's a more general purpose computer. So if we turn this on, it's actually running a 1977 version of Microsoft Basic, which was one of the very original basics that was run on all the early home computers. So AppleSoft Basic came from that. The Commodores used it. All sorts of computers used it. So I basically ported my own version to run on my hardware, which is what this is. And what I've been using that for is, in the 80s there were the sequence of books put out by Usborne, and all about computers and computer programming and different things you can do with micros, and this was all during the home computer revolution, I guess. And so I've collected all these books. It took me a long time to find them all on eBay and Trade Me in various places, and I've actually been reviewing them using that computer. So all the little programs and things, I type them in, get them running, and eventually I want to build the little robots and things. I actually built, when I was 15, I think, for a science fair, a robot that was connected to my Apple II, which was my computer at the time, and I want to recreate that using that computer I've made there. One of the other things I've just recently got back into is making plastic models. So basically as an excuse to get a small compressor. So I used to make these models, and I was never very good at painting them because I was painting them by hand. And so recently I discovered that these things are relatively cheap for a compressor and an airbrush, less than $200. So I bought one, mainly for using on my model railway stuff, which we'll have a look at in a second. But to get the hang of the airbrush, I've started making little plastic models again. Now, I used to wargame with a friend of mine, back 25 years ago now, and we used to make all these little models. As I say, I've just started, so far I've made one small tank which needs weathering, and I've just started on a plane. But I'm finding it very enjoyable because you come along and you just do a little bit, paint something, make something, put it all down and go away, and come back and do a little bit more later. It's very relaxing. Let's see, what else do we have? This is Steed, of course, the Steed puppet. So there's a film on him somewhere. He's a marionette. Over here behind him we've got a few more of my electrical gadgets. So it's Steed. He doesn't like it if you get too close. So this one, which will be hard to see, is a plasma lamp I made a long time ago. Things like this are getting harder to build because it uses parts from old CRT cathode ray tube TVs, which of course you don't really see as often these days. Be quiet, Steed. Behind there is, this is just a Jacob's ladder. That's very simple. That's basically just a neon sign transformer and a couple of electrodes, giving that sort of old Frankenstein effect. Now here, this is something I made 25 years ago or more. This is obviously a lightsaber, and it plays sounds and lights up as well. I actually had big long plastic blades that would screw onto the end. Now, doing something like this these days is actually reasonably easy because of the electronics you can get now. But back then, to get this to work was actually quite a bit of effort. And there's a little PIC processor in there, and a RAM chip, a ROM chip basically, an EEPROM, that I burned all the samples into, and that's how I made that. I have another one out there. What else do we have? Behind here, behind my modelling stuff, this is a Wimshurst machine, which is for generating static electricity. You crank the handle and these discs turn around and the whole thing charges up, and you get big sparks across the top there. Let's have a look out here. This is just another one of my lamps I made. Just with a variable adjuster for dimming. The big black thing in the corner there is actually a telescope. It's an 8-inch telescope I made some years ago for a friend of mine who was visiting from the States and asked if I could build him a telescope, so I did, and then when he went back home he said, well, I can't take it with me, so I ended up with it here. Now this is it's actually a clock. It doesn't look like a clock, but it's actually a GPS powered clock. And the idea behind this is, you look inside there's actually a little screen. It's a bit hard to see. As you turn the handle, it makes the screen come on and off so you can read the time. And the idea was that it was meant to be like one of those, the machines that they used to have on piers in the UK, where you'd sort of turn the handle and it would show you a little film on flick cards. So that was the effect I was going for. Various other steam engines and bits and pieces, all sorts of random stuff I collect. This is a Pandrol clip. That's what it's called. That's what they used to hold railway lines to sleepers. I found that on the road after they've been playing on the electrifying the railways here up in Auckland. There's another model behind there, very ancient model. Various other little bits and pieces. That was a picture of Steed that I actually had signed by Patrick McMee, so I sent it to him and he signed it for me, which was kind of nice. I'll stop this again here and we'll have a closer look at the TARDIS. Just before we look at this TARDIS, we'll have a quick look at these, which are just more ancient props I made a long time ago. Yeah, another 25 years ago sort of thing, just from Star Wars. I used to be much more of a Star Wars fan than I am now. I think the new films kind of ruined it for me a little bit. But this is just another lightsaber. This was the second one I made. And this is a blaster, Stormtrooper blaster. And it's actually got a laser in it. So, again, this being 25 years old, these days it would be easy to do that. You just use a laser diode or a laser pointer. But of course they weren't really around back then. So this actually has a helium neon laser tube in it, a very small one up in here. You know, physical glass tube. And then there's a big power supply for it and a whole bunch of batteries to power the thing. But that works reasonably well. Now, I'm surprised it's still going 25 years later. There's a few other things. There's a sand person up there. Now, this TARDIS. So the TARDIS is 3/4 scale. And the reason it's 3/4 scale is because it wouldn't fit in my house if it was full size. So the door's open, of course. And inside there we have a games console. You can see the high-tech support there holding it up in place. So if I remove that, which is a bit tricky since I've only haven't got any free hands. The console folds down, and inside here we have a games console. So in the base there's a computer, of course, and this is running an ancient version of Windows XP, but it's not connected to the internet, so I don't worry about keeping it too up to date. We'll just wait for the thing to start up. Now this is running MAME, which is the multiple arcade machine emulator software, which basically lets you play all sorts of old arcade games. We start MAME up. We have a trackball here, a couple of joysticks. This is a digital stick, this one's actually analog. And we can start one of the games. So I don't have any free hands to actually play it properly, but that's how that one works. It's all set up so you can just power it off with a flick of the switch. Machine all shuts down nicely, turns itself off. Put this away. One of the nice things about this TARDIS is these sign boxes come off. The whole thing's designed to come apart, and so I've been to various, convinced by a friend of mine to go to various fan things, Armageddon, things like that, and we've had it signed by various doctors and associated people. I'll just shut this up. Now down here, one thing you might notice is I've got a lot of photo equipment around. One of my hobbies is film photography, and I still develop and print my own black and white photos. So there's photo equipment and film and cameras and things all over the place. But sitting down here is the steampunk record player. Now this was basically a joke. I wanted to build something that was truly steampunk, so I made a steam engine here, just all made from scrap really, just bits and pieces I had around the garage, and used this to play a punk record, Sex Pistols record, and that was the joke. The machine works reasonably well. It's another one that's powered by an Arduino in here, and there's a servo in here that works the throttle to keep the speed constant. There's actually a little magnetic coil in here and little magnets around the edge of the platter, and I use that to sense the speed and then adjust the speed appropriately, and it works reasonably well. I could make it sound a lot better, but the whole point of it was to be steam powered, so I deliberately left it sounding wobbly. That was kind of the point of it. What else do we have? Now this is a dining table I've made with a model railway inside it. Obviously I haven't actually finished the railway part yet, I've just got the track laid and ballasted, and I need to do the rest of the scenery. But the idea is this will be a 1930s English countryside scene with the train going around it. Now the table I had to build, of course, because you can't just go out and buy things like this. So I ended up getting a cheap Rimu table off Trade Me for about $10, just so I could reuse these legs. And the top of the table was cracked, but I was able to cut around that and use the Rimu to make these sides of the table, because of course the table has to be deeper. And to lift it up a little bit, I got the little brass wheels off Trade Me. Now the top is also Rimu. Now these are made from floorboards, and these floorboards were from the original Auckland railway station. So they're tongue and groove. The glass, which is 8mm toughened glass, is actually sitting on the tongue here, and the groove I just filled in with a steel strap that goes all the way around the table, welded in the corners, just to finish it off and to give it a bit more strength. The whole top lifts up, of course, so you can get to the railway in there, and there's a hatch in the bottom, so there's a panel underneath there that slides, and eventually I'll use a controller like this, which is an original old Hornby train controller, and that'll be bolted to the outside of the table like that somehow, so you can control the train. So there's my table. What else do we have inside? I think maybe we should have a look outside, and there's a few bits and pieces out there as well that I can show you. So we'll head outside. It may be a little bit noisy because there's actually a cement mixer across the road fixing a driveway, so I don't know how noisy it's going to be. Now, I'm very lucky that my house is a small 2-bedroom house, but I've actually got 3-car garaging. So there's an original wooden garage we'll have a look at in a minute, and I had this double garage built, and this is where I do my car things mainly. So you can see here, this is a 1929 Austin Chummy. Tiny little car, but they're just great fun, hilariously funny to drive. 3-speed car. No synchromesh on anything, so it's double declutching up and down all the way. Behind here is a car I'm building. So I got into cars relatively late, I guess. I don't even know how it ended up happening. I just always thought it would be cool to restore a car. And I started off with MGBs. We'll have a look at the MG in a little while. And then I decided, well, that's a bit too modern for me. I prefer older cars. So this car is another Austin 7, an Austin 7 Special I've been building. So this is a later car. This is a 37 car, and basically I made the frame myself. I'm very lucky that I've got a friend who lives just down the road who's an expert metalworker, and he's been teaching me how to do all of this. So he's taught me how to shape the aluminium. We used an English wheel and slip rollers to form the aluminium panels, and then he's taught me how to weld it. So I've gas welded all this. This has all been gas welded with oxyacetylene. He's taught me how to do that. Taught me how to wire edges, and yeah, basically this is my little sports car that I'm building. The engine is currently, I'm having some modifications done to that because I'm looking at supercharging it, and hopefully I'll start building that soon. These things are wooden bucks, which we're going to use when we make the boot and the bonnet. So pretty much everything on this has been built. It's original chassis and original suspension and all that sort of stuff, but you know, things like the firewall, these panels, I've made all of those. Hopefully I'll get that one finished soon. Because after I finish that, underneath here is my next project, which is, this is a real vintage car. the little Austin there, they're great little cars, but they're almost like toy cars because they're so small and not a lot of power, and they don't actually go that fast. But underneath here is my next project, which is a Riley Brooklands. So this is a proper sports car. This was kind of like a boy racer, effectively a factory race car you could buy back in the day. So at some point I'll start working on that one after I finish my Austin. Over here, this is just a little tiny lathe I have. Very, very handy to have a lathe. You can do so much with them. They're never big enough, of course, so no matter what size lathe you have, whatever you want to make will be slightly bigger than the lathes. But even so, it's worth having even a tiny one like this. Under here, this is another very, very old project. This was my jet engine I built. There's a website I did many years ago called the Jet Powered Beer Cooler, which was kind of a joke, but it was actually based on this engine, which does run. It hasn't run, I haven't run this one for many, many years, and I'd redesigned it and I still have trouble with the combustion chamber here. There's something not quite right with the flame tube, so I haven't been able to get it to run reliably. I don't know if I'll ever come back to this one, but it's here and it's mostly all still there and all still running. Let's see, got various things in the garage, various railway pictures. I am a bit of a train geek, I must admit. So my little Austin is going to be painted in sort of blue-grey that they painted diesel locomotives in the UK in the 70s. Very distinctive sort of colour. Not too dissimilar to this colour actually. So this is one of my garages, and if we go outside, now this thing is actually a railway points lever that I restored. It's got a big toggle spring in the bottom, goes over with quite a bang, and you can sort of just see up there, maybe on top of the garage, is another little piece of railway type stuff, which is a little weather vane I made. Well, this is my second garage. This is actually the one that was here originally. This is where I have my MG, which was the first car I ever actually fully restored, which took me about 6 years because I was picking it up as I went along, had to learn how to weld and panel beat and all sorts of things. This is just another little gadget. It's just a phone, an old phone with yet another Arduino based device here, and this one just plays music. It actually slows down after a while, and you have to crack the handle to keep it going. Let's see. This is more of my Austin stuff. This is where I'll build the engine. Over here, it's a big thing of scrap aluminium, and this thing here is actually a furnace I built for melting down aluminium. So one of the things I've been playing with is casting aluminium, and so far I've only really cast one useful thing, which is this little adapter block that goes in here, and this is to mate my carburetor to the supercharger. But that's something I want to do more of if I can, is a bit more casting. I've got ideas for various things I want to make. There's another piece of railway type thing, which is a level crossing light. Unfortunately, I've only got one of them, not two, but that's another thing I restored, and that works. I was actually going to use it to make use it as a stoplight, and inside I've got a little radar sensor type thing that I was going to position down here somewhere, so that when the car drives up and is in the right place, the stoplight comes on. That's another project I need to do at some point. And I think that's more or less it. So hopefully that gives some idea of the kind of bits and pieces I play with and the sort of things I like to do. And most of my projects I have written up on my blog, on my websites at various points, so there's a lot more information there.